Okay, so thank you so much, by the way, for joining us and just, talking and sharing your stories. We talked a lot about how we can make this meaningful and how we can share some of your stories and the work that you've done with the community and, what peace building means to you. And it's funny because we've had these conversations with a lot of our team inside Kahanee, and we just like to start off all our interviews, funnily enough, by asking people, what's a story from, your upbringing, your childhood, or, growing up. It could be during college, it could be anything really, but like a moment that shaped who you are today, right now, and then, made you curious about the world. Is there anything that just comes to mind? Because I'm always like curious to learn about how people see the world.
Definitely. Well, firstly, thank you for this opportunity. Thrilled to share the global peace building work I'm so fortunate to be involved with and how I got here. This is a very easy question for me to answer, and it's something I continue with each year. Yeah. So I was selected when I was a sophomore in high school, or the second year of high school, depending on your high school systems globally, to attend a youth leadership seminar called HOBY, HOBY. It's in
Okay.
several countries across the globe, including Canada. Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership. I won't get into its whole history, but in essence, it brings together high school students who have 2 years left in their high school experience, hence why they choose
Right.
sophomores.
Right.
And you're generally one of the only students from your high school, so you don't really know anyone when you attend this summit, but they're
Oh,
all
yeah.
from the same state or city or area, and they're all the same age as you. And then they're all leaders, however that school or homeschool environment defines leadership. For me, it was an essay contest that I won, but from other schools, it's their student body president or a student
Yeah.
maybe struggling academically that could use this push, whatever the school defines. I was just grateful that I was selected, and I went to not only my local one. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia originally, so I went to the Georgia State one.
Oh, nice.
I
Yeah.
also went to the international one, which is alumni of all of the states and countries together for a week-long deeper dive into global peace building, leadership, community service, these great things that is powerful to instill in high
Yeah.
school sophomores so that they have at least 2 more years in their community, no matter what they do post high school, college, military, or otherwise. And it was just a really powerful space to meet other people my age, my state, my excitement for what the future
Yeah.
like at such 15, 16 years old. Those are relationships I'm still very close with now, many, many years later. And I continue to volunteer there every single year. In fact, the majority of the volunteers at all of these individual sites are alumni themselves. So when they were this age, did this program and see the value in giving back and continuing to support young people. I am very much one of those volunteers. I do many of these service programs because it's such a
Right.
powerful opportunity to connect with young people, both on the state level and, of course, at the international. When I was a student going through the program at the international level, my roommate was supposed to be from Hobi, Iraq, which does exist, but it was the year 2011, the start of the Arab Spring, and so his visa got revoked a week before the program.
Right.
So his information was everywhere, but I didn't have a roommate just because of how quickly it was to the actual summit.
Yeah.
I mean, that got me really angry. He did this program just like I did in his home country or area, was selected and chosen to come to this international, and just as I was, why is he not here?
Yeah.
And I think of the many elements of global peace building, that was the largest one for me of why is this other country, this other fabulous young student, just as myself, not given this opportunity when his name's on the roster? We found his social media and still connected with him. So he was able to attend a little bit, which was nice. But it was really disheartening to me that
Yeah.
global leadership choices impacted the abilities of youth to collaborate and connect at that summit. And so, one of the reasons I continue to volunteer is to support all those types of students, no matter where they're from, to have these transformative youth leadership opportunities and build these networks of young people. I joke that the friendships they make over the one weekend are probably stronger than the friendships they've known since kindergarten. I mean, at least that
Yeah.
was true for me, and it's true for a lot of them, not all. But it's a really powerful space to sort of walk in. What does youth leadership mean? And no one really knows. What is a
Yeah.
seminar? What is a Hobie camp? No one knows what those things are. But they leave this program, again, which is all over the globe, with a really powerful sense of community, of meeting other young people their age. Maybe they do a citywide cleanup day or a volunteerism
Right.
program, or they likely become college roommates. I know several weddings that were, They got married when it was appropriately aged, but they met when they were 16. Like these
Exactly,
are
yeah.
really powerful connections personally and professionally that are built from such a young age, really at the beginning of their high school experience, that I was really fortunate to be and I'm still really involved with. Its mission is not specifically peace building, it's really just youth leadership and community service, but the through lines are very thick. I mean, not most of the alumni don't go into the peace building field like I have, but I see the same element of supporting and training local youth lead to more, connected and progressive societies. Progressive in the sense not politically, but of the
Right.
community coming together and working on solving community challenges. And by doing that at a youth age and actually giving them the skills and tools to do those things, you very much see those positive changes, through community service, through engagement with all members of that community, whatever it may be. It's a really powerful program that I'm thrilled to still be very involved with.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I can definitely source the genesis of a lot of the peace building and academic work I have done since my high school experience to being selected that first program 14 years ago now.
Well, that's just amazing because I mean, you've also been part of MUN, right? And then I growing up, I was very active with MUN and the club at school and going to these conferences. And I remember those connections were like a source of inspiration for me, like seeing people talk, seeing people being so confident with themselves. And those networks that you built there, they're so long lasting because you find that community of people that think like you, that want to have big ideas like you, that want to see change like you. And I've seen like a lot of people from those programs, go on to Harvard and these Cambridge and these big universities and do some great things. So I think I definitely understand when you have those kind of programs set in place for people like who see that there is a need for change. I think there's so much of potential for impact. No, that's amazing, and I'm
I
so
was
glad you
really
shared that.
involved with Model UN even before I did this program because I started at the beginning
Right,
of my high school experience. And what was really fun was after it, the friends I met from the other countries around the globe, when I was representing that country in the Model UN space, I asked them directly, like, how does your country, or really, how do you, as a
right,
representative of your country, feel about this? Because I couldn't reach out to the Turkish government, but
yeah,
friends from Turkey, and they told me, X, Y, and Z. I don't know if it made my opportunity stronger, but at least I was more
yeah,
genuine in my representation through the Model UN space. And I mean, I remember so clearly, like
absolutely.
walking into the United Nations for the first time with my job, which I guess we'll get to in this interview. Of like, oh wow, yeah, that I did. This is the same. How cool! The like
Yeah,
the Model UN nerd in me that is still very very strong.
I've been here before,
Yeah,
just not right here, but I've been here.
it
Yeah.
was cool
No,
energy.
that's beautiful because I remember, like I was also, funnily enough, I remember representing Turkey and Seychelles and all these countries, and I always remember like, I know nothing about these countries, but I come here and I represent these countries as if like I'm their president. But like truly, the fact is that it's so interesting that when you talk to someone from these countries and then it's so detached from reality of like what people talk about like in MUN and then even the actual United Nations. So but it's a great way to reflect now, I think, thinking back on it, and how it's always good to have those narratives and stories from people on the ground. But yeah, I mean, you've actually worked in a lot of places, like Morocco, Jordan, Lebanon, and Oman. These are places you worked in, right? And I'm not
Uh,
getting my
Studied abroad. My PhD dissertation is on Oman and Lebanon, so I've lived in
okay.
those countries through my studies, learning Arabic and exploring the region worldwide.
Amazing. That's
Um,
amazing.
and then I interned and worked in Jordan as well, so I had a little bit of work experience in one of those countries too.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I was like, I just don't want to get my facts wrong here.
No,
But
no.
like, was there a moment, you know, because before we even get into it, tell me a little bit about the food. I just want to know about the food that you experienced in these countries.
It is
How was it?
probably when I tell people, because I'm a white Jewish Southerner from the United States. Why do I have an interest in the Middle East? It's
Right.
not really relevant generally, at least region wide. And the largest answer is the food. Quite frankly, I mean, nothing beats a hummus platter. I mean, nothing does.
No.
I was so lucky and blessed to be surrounded by the best food from the Arab world in all of my studies. one of the reasons I chose the university I did for my bachelor's degree was its prowess for study abroad. I did 6 different exchange programs throughout my degree, all
Right.
6 in the Middle East, and all 6 with a heavy emphasis on Arabic, but also food. It was the best way to eat my way through the region of literally learning the cultural dynamics, but also enjoying.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of the, and I was also there during Ramadan for 3 years,
Oh,
which I did fast because the whole country was doing it, and I wanted to celebrate and learn this
right.
cultural element. And every night of Ramadan ends with like a 4 course meal plus. I mean, it's a bounty of food celebrating
Right.
that day of fasting and why Ramadan happens. And like it's like the best home cooked. It's just the best part of the region.
Oh my
Living
gosh.
in a
Yeah.
homestay with Moroccan or Jordanian and Omani host family, and like helping them cook the Ramadan iftar, the name of the meal you break your fast with.
Right.
It's incredible. And I
My
think
God.
they felt really, I don't want to speak for them necessarily, but the fact that their American, host son, me, from who is not of their culture or their religion or their language was like helping supporting the cooking or the cleaning or like
Right.
fasting along with them. I mean, for me, that is the definition of cultural immersion and engagement. And the food was a huge avenue through that, but being there during Ramadan was an even larger way to appreciate the food even more so.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
I,
Yeah.
I fast every year for Yom Kippur, which quite frankly I think is harder. It's 25 hours in a row, no food or water.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ramadan is just when the sun's up, so it's still difficult and it's 30 days, but there is opportunities to replenish yourself throughout the day, not in
Exactly.
Yom
Yeah.
Kippur. And it becomes your routine. The whole country is doing it, and your schedule, my classwork like changed to celebrate Ramadan. I mean, I went to so many iftars with my professors and like the host family friends I
Right.
made. It's just such a communal way of celebrating, of course, the faith and their fasting,
Yeah.
the food as well. Like that's such a big. There are special meals for different parts of Ramadan. There's special like feasts where the Eid, the
Right.
holiday at the end of Ramadan. Like there are so many food related elements for a month of fasting that was really intriguing for me to like discover. Yeah, I knew about fasting in Ramadan. I didn't realize how much food would also be a part of the fasting month. And it was such a beautiful way of celebrating the different dynamics of the culture and seeing how, because I was in Ramadan for the entirety of Ramadan 2014 in Morocco and 2016 in Jordan. So seeing how two different countries also
Right.
have reverence for food and community building, it was such a bonus to my studies that no textbook could ever tell me.
And it's almost like, like you almost forget Ramadan is about fasting because there's so much of food. And you're like, how is this about fasting? And then, oh my gosh, because I remember growing up, we're such a multicultural society back in Sri Lanka. So in
Yes,
school, we had so many Muslim students. And I loved Ramadan season because we would be in solidarity with our Muslim sisters and brothers, and we would fast along with them. And, we would be cautious when drinking water during the day, but then that love was reciprocated with like these beautiful food and feasts with iftar and like biryani and all, like so good. I just think Middle Eastern cuisine is just like some of the best cuisines of the world. I Hands down.
totally agree.
So I was like thinking, and the reason I asked you about, your experiences with food is because I'm sure you've had like the opportunity to have so many conversations and when you're sharing a meal. Was there anything that even like subtle that kind of just shifted your understanding of what security means for people? Because I think we often like get that mistaken sometimes. Everyone has their idea of what security means, but what's your understanding of security and how has that been affected by, these experiences that you've shared with so many people?
Good question. I mean, I think the strength of at least the communities in the Middle East I connected with is their larger, not just like physical tribe, although that is a
Yeah,
way that they're organized, but like the chosen tribe, you also could say, of like community of colleagues, neighbors, cousins,
right,
etc. Like it's very clear the family unit, and family being a very broad definition here is really powerful there. So
right,
much so that I would go to an iftar with like maybe 50, 60 people in this family's home, and they met most of them that afternoon or like the day before, and yet invited them to come to their family home. Once you're a guest in their house once, you're kind of a guest for life. Like there's a lot of these hospitality elements embedded
right,
in the Middle East region, which is somewhat similar to the southern United States region, which is where I'm from and grew up. The
Right.
hospitality element, the Middle Easterners do it better. Absolutely, I will say that unequivocally. The element of like, hey, like you're in our area, like let's share a meal, let's break some bread, come to my home, like, welcome.
Right.
That sort of open door policy, so to speak, is something I'm accustomed with growing up in the South, specifically Atlanta,
Right.
and seeing it in the region, but done on a much wider scale during, a difficult month. I mean, Ramadan is a beautiful month, but it is also difficult to fast and maintain steadfast in the reasons to fast. So there's all of this difficulty, but celebration and joy and discomfort and community all wrapped up in this month. And for me, as a foreigner in every definition to the region, and yet being immediately included and accepted, having my rudimentary Arabic, but still conversations in the language I don't speak fully, was just really powerful. And I mean, I don't say like that is security, but the chance of community building and having eyes all over the way you live, the neighbors you are connected with, your colleagues, like
Right.
it's counteracting like loneliness in a lot of ways by being so community driven, that I found really powerful.
Right.
And community dynamics, social cohesion, dialogue work, a lot of these peace building terms that we both use in our field work and
Right.
support of our communities is sort of embedded in at least how Iftar was run, but also just the regular parts of the region of how they, are tribally organized, but also connected in community wise.
Right.
It's really powerful
Yeah. No,
building
no,
those.
sorry. Yeah, go
No, I
ahead.
mean, interrupt me, but like building those relationships that I was able to make in what my 3 months living there are
Right.
decades long familial connections that are supported and celebrated throughout the region that are
Right.
just powerful to watch.
Well, I was just thinking because when you were saying that, I just remembered watching this somewhere while I was endlessly scrolling on Instagram, I think. But it was someone shared their experience of, how being a Muslim or in the Islamic religion, alcohol is something that's not allowed to be consumed, right? Generally. And people find, like, if you're a teenager or if you're someone who's grown up Muslim, and if you're in college and that's part of your culture, you can actually find people who don't drink and still find other ways to have fun. And I found that so amazing, the way that this person shared that, because it was talking about how you can build a community and still not feel isolated and not feel disconnected from the world, and how religion and how community can make you feel that way. And I just love that. And I think that that comes to that idea of what you're trying to say, is that security comes from the family, the chosen family that we have, the neighbors, the people, and then an open door policy: come in, have some food, come talk to us. And I think I see that a lot in the global south, I think more so than in western countries.
Yeah, fully.
That's amazing. Yeah, wow. I just love that.
It was cool to be engaged as someone who's not, I was the only non-Muslim person in the room. I was the only non-Arabic speaking fluent person. I was the only non-Moroccan or non-Jordanian
Right.
person. And yet, as if I was, their family friend from 80 years ago. I mean, there was just this sense of like, cool, yeah, he knows enough Arabic. He's here studying and learning our culture. One of the I don't mean to disparage the French when I start this. This will make sense in a second. But like before Arabic, I did French in high school and was relatively good at it, and went to Paris with my high school French class. And when I tried to speak French, which, again, I was pretty comfortable with, they would respond to me in English, and felt it could have just been a couple pissed off Parisians. Let me be less generalizable. But it was like there was this like disdain for me trying to learn their
Right.
language if I was butchering it. Whereas
Right.
when I went to Arabic, which was a brand new language to me, and I definitely was butchering it, every single person in every single Arab country I have been to was like, "Oh my gosh, he's trying. That's so cool. He's learning our community, our language, our culture." Like, yeah, he had 7 grammatical problems, but that's so like good for him. He's here, and that like energy shift is another reason why I've stayed so engaged in the region. Is
Oh
that
my
I felt
gosh.
I felt so much more connected into this community security envelope that is a big part of this Middle Eastern global South at large regions.
Yeah.
It was
Like,
just
I'm
like,
sorry, I just wanted to say, I just, when you were saying that, like, I was getting like so much, like, I was like getting goosebumps all over,
yeah,
because
it
I
was,
was like, damn, that's so beautiful, because like people,
yeah, it was,
yes, I do find that, and a lot of people do say, like, yeah, and I've heard this not just from you, but from other people. But when you go to European countries and you try their language, you're like, actually do speak English. Like I can
Yeah.
speak English, but I also found that a lot of people from the global south are almost forced to learn English as a language. And we have these programs as ESL, English as a second language, right? And you almost are, we as society are much more critical of people from the global south, people who look like me, of being butchering, English as a language. But the moment, someone like, when you try to learn their language and they're like, hey, yes, amazing. You're trying to learn our culture, trying to learn our language. And that's so nice that you had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was replicated in every single Middle Eastern country I've been to. It wasn't a
Right.
one-off. It was a really powerful like connection point of, yeah, sure, I'm not fluent in this language. I'm brand new to it. I'm pronouncing everything different, sure, but I want to learn about you, and I'm going to push myself into speaking a language I don't know.
Right.
Thank you for being a informal teacher to me in this moment. I mean, I joke, and almost all the programs I went to, the taxi cab rides were the best classroom because it's what 15 minutes 30 minutes maximum. You'll never see that person again because there's so
No.
many, but you can try a new dialogue or do the same conversation twice and see how you can get faster or more comfortable
Right.
or get the letters better or whatever. It was incredible. And then so many taxi drivers are from different regions of the world, or of the Middle East at least, so you can like practice different dialects when you learn like, oh, this is the Egyptian word for blah blah blah, let me try it. Those experiences were really powerful, where felt really countrywide. And compared to some places in Europe, at least, and definitely in the United States, there's not the same level of, thank you for learning about us. It's, you should
No.
already know about us. It's sort of the mind shift. And yet in the region, it's like, well, we had to learn about you, so the fact that you're trying to learn about us is really powerful, which is,
Exactly.
I mean, very sweet, and I'm touched to feel that way, but it's also a little disappointing that they feel um seconded or othered by the dominance of English. I mean, this interview right now is in English.
Exactly. No, that I mean, I was thinking about that because like accessibility, right? And there's so many people and like even stories, like how many stories have gone unheard because we don't take the time and effort to understand someone's language. We don't try to take time to understand someone's culture. And that's just so disheartening to believe. And it's not to like put criticism on the West as a whole, but it's also talking about like, Western imperialism and how we should kind of,
Amen.
continue to decolonize as we go and then do the works that and then decolonize English as its majority language and encourage people to like go beyond and expand their minds and do that hard work of learning other people's language. So find that so
Which is
beautiful.
one of the reasons I was so grateful as a 16-year-old to meet people from other countries when I went to that global summit. I mean, there were 400 of us, of like the students there, and I think 100 were not from the United States
Right.
amongst like 15 or so
Yeah.
countries. So it was just so powerful. Like, oh, like what's if I was from your country, this is what my life might look like. Like tell me things, share. And they
Right.
were just curious about what their life would be if they were from Atlanta. I mean, it was just a really cool like cultural dialogue opportunity. And
Right.
in those cases, an interfaith one specifically, of like, hey, we're different faiths, we're different parts of the world, but we're all doing this cool program together. Let me learn about you, let you learn about me, and have these informal but powerful, friendship dialogues that have very much carried on to all
Yeah.
of international exchanges and work I've done since.
That's just so beautiful. Yeah, I think language is like one of those ways that, like it can just connect people in so many different ways. I need to do more work in learning different languages. And right now my Duolingo is like 150 on French, but I
There you
think I
go.
need to
Maybe yeah.
I need to expand. But correct me if I'm wrong here, but you've done a lot of interfaith work as well. And I think that's so beautiful because it ties back to a lot of what we've been talking about, which is building communities, but also bridging gaps of understanding between communities. Was there a time where you kind of just saw something unexpected? Like maybe two people just finding common ground or anything like that, just where it seemed impossible, but then something changed in that moment and brought those people together.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of instances of that, and I mean, it's interesting. I'm often the only Jewish person in a lot of these spaces that I'm in, generally.
Mm,
So most things I do in any faith-based work, it's already automatically an interfaith
right.
conversation. reflection, just personally. And I'll get to your point of the actual dialogues, but a little bit more of a personal reflection.
Yeah.
It was so intriguing going to the region of the Middle East because at least from US media, I would assume maybe Canadian and European, there's this wrong conflation that all Arabs dislike Jewish people. It's just incorrect, unequivocally. I was still, a little bit safe walking into the space I was, being like, "Hi, I'm a Jewish person. Nice to meet you," which is also not how I interact, anyways. But it was so immediately like, "Oh no, cool, like same stories, Abraham, Ismail, Abraham, Ibrahim, like cool,
Right.
whatever."
Yeah.
Like, Isaac versus Ismail, but it's the same story.
Right.
These interfaith components are like, yeah, same, similar ways of practice and methods that made me feel even more religious in being in the region, even though I was, there was no Jewish events while I was there, and
Yeah.
yet fasting during Ramadan felt so communal in the same way that I know it for Yom Kippur.
Right.
Uh, so, like, personally, those elements of learning the region made me even more resolute and spiritual in my own practice because of the interconnections to this region that I found really powerful. And that sort of led to my interest in interfaith work. I mean, I'm finishing up my PhD
Mm.
in this subject, interfaith dialogue in Oman and Lebanon. I, do a lot of interfaith support work with Mediators Beyond Borders International, where I work primarily. We're part of the Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers, NRTP, which is a global, specifically interfaith peacebuilding organization. And I'm a fellow for the Freedom of Religion Belief organization called First Freedom Foundation. So I've purposely put myself in a lot of these interfaith areas. Because there's not often a Jewish voice in that space, so I'm thrilled to be able to include that perspective, but also B, because they're really powerful conversations of community building. And especially in Western places, there are a lot more faiths generally in those spaces. Whereas,
Right.
sort of opposite to what we were saying before, the global South is a lot more homogenous, religiously at least, and the Western countries are a lot more diverse religiously. So interfaith dialogue is, to me, a much stronger need in Western spaces where
Yeah.
religions are assumed and the tenets of them are inaccurately understood.
Right.
And it's always been a really powerful element of my studies as well as my physical experiences to experience the religious component. I mean, especially in the
Mm.
Middle East, but most countries, like, religion is the unifying social identity. I mean, in the US at least, and I would assume Canada too, race is really number one.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
the different ethnicities and whatnot. But in the Middle East, at least, it's absolutely religion. It's not that people are more religious, but your
Right.
name is a religious one. Your schedule might be aligned with religious timings. You'll hear the
Right.
call to prayer. Like, even if you're not Muslim, like, that is still embedded in religious life or regular life. Religion
Right.
there. And that was really, really powerful for me to learn as a student of peace and conflict studies and international relations of these tenets are mandatory to the
Right.
cultural context. I can't ignore it. I mean, obviously, I
No.
can't ham to a Jewish Muslim dialogue. No one would eat it.
Right.
But there are other elements to the cultural components that living there made it more aware for me to how to engage with different communities and different religions. And so in doing the fellowship work that I'm involved with, the work at MBBI, the work with NRTP, etc., is the focus is bringing together those different communities of faith
Right.
and having really powerful dialogues. I can't really speak to one specific aha moment because they often don't happen in the dialogue. They happen much later and much more privately where they reflect on those spaces. But it's been really powerful to help convene and organize those types of communities of, hey, let's just reflect on the news of the day. We're all different faiths.
Right.
Cool. Like, I'm not going to ask you about your theological tenets. That's not what we're doing here. I want to learn about XYZ, about your
Right.
thoughts. Those components are really powerful and have been really intriguing to support, but also be involved with
Right.
personally and professionally.
Well, I mean, when you were talking about, kind of how a lot of these countries in the Middle East, they are very religious based, and they, their calendar, their schedules, and everything is based. But I think sometimes we often also forget that, here in the West, a lot of it is also very religious based. And, if you think about it, our calendar is a Christian calendar. When you think about it, our schedules are are formed around Christmas, and this is it's like this. So I think it's just so normalized, and like it's this. I don't want to even say the word, but hegemonized. Yes, but
Very much
we're
is.
such a hegemony. I That's like a $2 word. But uh, we're so powerful in the way that we think in the West that it's difficult to sometimes even see that other cultures can operate in the same way, but just not exactly how we envision it.
Well,
And then,
on every other metric, I'm part of the majority. I understand that, but religiously, I'm not. And so it's been really
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
this sort of assumed identity of how the I should interact or how my schedule should be, or whatever, when that's not my faith identity, and that's not my
Yeah.
practice. And being in a region where, again, that's also not my faith identity or practice. I'm not
Right.
Muslim, but it was celebrated in a way, or at least connected and intrigued in a way that is sort of ignored and railroaded here in the West. And
Exactly.
I
And
think that's the
that's,
difference. Like, I mean, again,
yeah.
I wasn't like adopt everything for me. No,
No, no.
but it
And I
was
think that's beautiful because like it also just invites people to like think about how we as a community can understand and adopt cultural practices, but also like hold space, for the differences that we have. And I think that that interfaith dialogue is so important, and I'm so glad that you said that it's important more here in the West, because we hold those basic assumptions about people and what ought to be than what could be, or what uh new opportunities,
a lot
new
more like
ways of thinking.
monolithic thinking on religion in the West than
Absolutely.
in the rest of the world. And I think my experiences outside of the United States and Western spaces have given me more insight into religion than being um, in the US, where there are more religious groups. Because
Right.
there's more religious groups and communities here, but they're not integrated in the same way. Whereas in other parts of the world, they're the minority faith in that country or space, or maybe it's a half-half, depending on the populations of those
Right.
countries. But I mean, as you said, like living in Sri Lanka, the Muslim and Hindu communities collaborated often. I mean, and of course,
Yeah.
unlike undeniable other faiths in those countries too
Yeah.
and areas, but like it's not a okay, cool. This is how all blah blah blahs think about this.
Right.
It's just not reality, but that's unfortunately how a lot of Western spaces are organized.
Absolutely. And I think that's that it's that dialogue that we're having, that you're having, and that those interfaith talks that definitely help challenge those. And I'm so glad that it's people out there like you who are doing this work, because we
Thanks.
need it. We need it for sure.
Definitely.
Um and I would just want to do on that same vein, kind of talk a bit about a bit more first. Well, everything is sad, but I think something that's a bit difficult right now is the Syrian refugee crisis. And you've spent a lot of time researching that, and always curious to know what happens on the ground. It's so easy to like turn on CNN, turn on BBC, Al Jazeera, all these big news networks, and hear about what's happening. But really, you never get to hear stories from people who've worked on the ground, who've been there, who've done some work. And it always sometimes fits a narrative if it's on the big TV. So I just wanted to know, is there like a story that really stayed with you, or, someone who helped, and put the displacement into perspective, right? Not just as like this, going beyond those statistics of people, and seeing conflict as a deeply personal and human experience. Was there like a moment for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, my bachelor's thesis was all about the Syrian refugee context, but in the lens of Jordan, since that's where I did my full semester and did work at a peace building institute in Jordan. And it was really powerful because the majority of the taxi drivers or roadside stand, food vendors, etc., a lot of them were Syrian.
Right.
Those were the opportunities for work that they were able to find.
Hmm.
What was really intriguing is when I was there, or like a month before I got to Jordan, is when they installed a work permit program, the Jordanian government, for this was 2016, so you know many years ago, but instituted a special permit program for Syrians specifically. I
Sorry,
mean,
I just wanted to say, like, 2016 does not feel like a long time ago. Why does, and I'm like, oh wait, it's actually
no,
9 years
9 years ago,
ago. That's
a decade ago.
crazy.
Yeah, it
Sorry, I
is.
just wanted to put that out
Yeah,
there.
no,
That's
and
nuts.
unfortunately, refugee crisis has not been solved effectively.
Right.
So
That's
we'll,
sad.
we'll say that as as bland as we can be. No, it was really intense because even in 2016, that was 5 years on of
Yeah.
this conflict in Syria, and Jordan has been politely inundated with refugees in the majority
Hmm.
of its existence as a country, and the Syrians, represented the largest influx of a citizen community into Jordan as a result of the Syrian war. And so, yes, there was, of course, refugee camps built, which I have many, many thoughts about, but we won't get into them here. The part that I found really powerful was meeting the actual physical Syrians who fled their country, came into Jordan, and were able to obtain work permit status, or their cousin happened to be Jordanian and were able to support them in some other way, through
Right.
farms or vendors or taxis, whatever it might have been. And so actually getting, none of this made it into my thesis because it was more informal and it was just my like curiosity.
Yeah.
But like, tell me stories you miss about Syria, and tell me stories
Mm.
about your country and your community and your city and etc. that, you don't want to lose. It was really beautiful to hear from these displaced Syrians what they love and miss about their space, which, hopefully is being rebuilt in the current transitional space.
Right.
Have a lot of eyes in supporting, and MBBI specifically has been working with a Syrian organization called the Center for Civil Society and Democracy, CCSD. We've been doing a monthly Syrian webinar series, bringing voices from
Very
Syria
nice.
and the Syrian community to the global stage. If you just Google MBBI and then Syria and CCSD, you'll see many articles and recordings and reports about it. So please,
Right.
viewers, check it out. But
Yeah.
it's a way to sort of engage and connect with the modern iteration of Syria, with the question of sort of how do we rebuild and who's involved in that rebuilding process. Because, of course, the government has shifted. There's now a transitional one in place, but how representative will that be?
Right.
Faiths are included in that decision making process, what organizations are involved, what funding sources, what connections globally. I mean, there's a lot of really significant questions to answer, and I'm not the one to do it. I'm not Syrian, but in engaging and collaborating with Syrian organizations, that's one of the ways MBBI has been able to support it currently. So it's been interesting
Right.
to be on the ground in Jordan and view it from the Jordanian side of sort of the receiving end of a refugee crisis, 9 years ago, and then now, 8 years later, 9 years later, supporting the transitional phase through these dialogues and information sharing sessions. One of the many reasons I'm so grateful to be involved with the MBBI is we do this kind of stuff frequently, of collaborating with on the ground local communities and amplifying their voices, because they're the ones in that community. Their voices need to be heard and supported at the table. Far too often, peace building initiatives, as good-hearted as they might be, ignore the needs of the local community, or ignores maybe too strong, but aren't inclusive of the local
Right. Yeah.
community, and assume what they may need or want when that isn't always the case. So I appreciate, I'm not saying MBBI is the best or the gold standard. I mean, I'm appreciative to work there and I love the stuff that they do, but I am grateful that their priority has always been amplifying in partnerships and local ownership of conflicts. Kind of this decolonizing point you mentioned earlier, of
Right.
ensuring that the local community is at the forefront and at the table, not just a right, let's ask them what they think, because that at that point you're too late in the process. You haven't included them in the design. What they actually need is very different than what your research would suggest. Your general you. I have a lot of gripes with a lot of our colleagues in the development, econ, peace building space, who excellent intentions, but sometimes forget the actual communities that they're working with, and monolith a lot of the needs that they're trying to meet. When they don't actually have the voices of those on the ground involved, then they're never going to helpfully support the transition or the peace building processes.
Well, that, I was just gonna say, and then you kind of got to that point, but even when I was doing a lot of my work with my bachelor's and with just academia, I just found that it was lacking so much of personal narratives. I mean, even the way that universities are taught to, or teach students to craft their thesis and it's on all these, in the work that they do, it's very technical, stick to the facts, stick to the statistics and all of that. But I think, and this is a huge thing that I grappled with when I was doing my work, was how do you make academic work which is important. And I'm sure you and a lot of your colleagues have done this, and I've seen a lot of my colleagues have done this. But how do you make it accessible to the common folk? And when I mean common folk here, I'm talking about people who aren't actively going on ResearchGate and looking up articles, and then how do we make this content? Because we're doing such good work, we are researching, but the only way that we can make it accessible is through stories and through hearing what people's experiences are, instead of blanketly, throwing out statistics of, what's this and what's that and how this affected this person. But and so I'm so glad that you also grapple with the challenge of, academia not being inclusive of, or not even just academia, but any kind of work that we do.
Well, I'm also a current PhD student, so I have a lot of investment in this conversation. Of I call myself a pracademic, a practitioner academic, much more
Right.
on the practitioner side of that portmanteau. And I've had this conversation with my PhD mentors and advisors often of, yes, this theory is great, but it's not necessarily applicable in every case here on the ground, because this is how like, yes, the theory guides then the practical elements. I get that. I understand it's our backdrop. It's important to research it, but these on the ground communities need this kind of support. They don't need a theory of how it could work. And I mean, I've grappled with that throughout my thesis, which is on interfaith dialogue efforts in Oman and Lebanon. How do I include and engage the local communities and the networks I've reached out to and trained and supported, but do it in a way that's not, here is 800 words of theory, here is a
Yeah.
practical recommendations guide. So I've done sort of both. I've had
Yeah.
theoretical analysis embedded in my thesis, but also like a recommendations page of, like, here are clear steps to support this type of dialogue training. That's been part of it. But then also on the MBBI side, so my professional side as well, most of our work is through impact stories. I mean, explore our website, dear listener, and
Yeah.
everything there. But it's really amplifying those of the community. I mean, all of our work, not just the Syria project I mentioned, has been in partnership and engagement with locals on the ground, whether that's a countrywide dialogue process in Indonesia, reintegrating former extremists back into Indonesian society. It's a project we've done supporting gangs and violence in Los
Right.
Angeles, dialogues in that space, supporting refugees from Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, you can see these projects all across our website, but all of those are directly in collaborating with local communities. And a great example of this is, as we're going to Peru in a couple of months, which we hope you all listeners will come join us. Kahanee is a sponsor of our summit, which we're grateful for,
Yes.
and a big part of it. And hopefully you're there too, Rameth. We'll meet up in person.
Fully. Yes.
But a big part of the summit in Peru that we host, or will be hosting in late September, early October, is highlighting stories of the region. We host these global summits often. This is our 11th one, our first in South America, but we, continent hop each time, because it's important to bring together different regional mediators and also highlight that continent or those countries nearby, their stories, which is why we chose Lima. And a big part of the summit that we're about to host is on story sharing and engagement. Again, Kahanee being a host is very much aligning with Kahanee's work through stories and story change, and also narratives, which I'm assuming you are well connected with, given you both have the same director. But the work of stories and people-centered peace building is, crucial and critical to Kahanee and to MBBI. And
Exactly.
we're thrilled to partner with you all as we lead to Lima later this year.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about that because, the storytelling aspect is what we need more. And I'm so glad that MBBI is doing it. And this is just like a wild thought of the back of my head. But like, we're at this age of like AI taking over the world and blah blah blah. One of the things is that AI scours the internet, and I hope we get to this point where one day a student comes across like an AI generated answer that they just like got from chat gpt, and it talks about the importance of stories, and it talks about how story work can be is integral to conflict resolution, to peace building, and to into all of that. And I hope we get, and I think that's why it's so important that we put that information in those stories that MBBI is doing, putting it on your website, and talking about people and their real experiences. But yeah, no, I'm super excited for the Peace Summit in Peru as well, and I think it's going to be really important. But I feel like before we kind of wrap out, I wanted to talk to you a bit about, speaking of Lima, Peru, it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. It's so
Excited.
I just like and I just recently this past week I was up here and not well, I was closer to the Ontario border in Falcon Lake in Manitoba. It's a beautiful place, and I had the opportunity to kind of bask in the sunlight and just jump into the lake and then kind of go on these beautiful long walks. And one of the things that I did do remember, and I hope I'm not going on a tangent here, but I went on a little walk on a trail, and it was like pine trees just surrounding us, and it's beautiful, and it's just like a scene out of a movie. And there was this little like a bench like in a nice little glade, um and I just sat there, and I remember, and then this is very poetic, but I think it was warranted, but I just kind of like brushed my hand against the bench, kind of feeling how like the stone feels against your hand, just like grabbing some of those pine needles and pine cones off the ground, feeling how it feels, and smell the scent, letting the breeze take over, and just like living in the moment. Because I feel like a lot of us right now are so just discombobulated, but also just like completely out, having these out of body experiences, because it's so difficult to keep up with everything that's happening outside the world. Sometimes even when you do have like these amazing natural experiences, when you're out there with nature, it's so difficult to feel connectedness. So I had to purposefully like sit down and like engage all my senses and take like a photographic memory. The reason I bring this up is because I read that somewhere you kind of value time in nature, and I'm sure you've had those moments where you've been in like the middle of like a difficult project, difficult research, and you've taken time off to connect with nature, and then just like evaluate what you're doing. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think a lot of people want to know how nature plays a part in the work that you do, how you connect to nature, how you connect to land, and how, has there anything that's been so profound, like something that's clicked for you, you know, during a walk, a trip, or anything like that?
Great question. And I'm thrilled you had such a powerful moment at Falcon Lake. I just looked at pictures. It's stunning. I hope to visit it one day.
It's a beautiful
Um,
place.
yeah, on my list now. No, I mean nature's a huge deal. You have to respect the earth we're on and enjoy the beauty that is there, but also safeguard it for our future communities to still engage with it. I
Right.
mean, I love being able to explore all the different geographical features that is on this planet.
Right.
Big part of my recentering. I mean, all of the moments and things you felt describing your time at Falcon Lake is how I very much feel as well. And
Yeah.
uh, I mean, I am so excited for Peru for many reasons, but I'm ending the program going to Machu Picchu, which I'm just so thrilled about. And I'm like hiking up there, not just seeing the beautiful,
My
you know,
God.
final space, but the actual mountain and the reverence that those ancient communities had for the space that
Right.
they live is really powerful to see and witness, and how well preserved it is for other people to engage with. But even our most recent Global Peace Summit was in 2023. We do every odd year. Was in Nairobi, Kenya, and after that summit ended, I went to a inactive volcano. It's called Longana, and hiked around the rim and enjoyed the lush greenery. Volcanic ash is the best accelerant and soil for trees. But it was just beautiful to be in, a destructive thing like a volcano, which
Right.
is for hundreds of years now, and see so many lush greenery and gorgeous trees and people there, respecting. There was, no trash on the trails, and people picked it up if there was any. Like, it was really a space to respect the land that area of, northern Nairobi, or about an hour north of Nairobi
Yeah.
is. But like not just Kenya and Peru. I mean, even here in Washington D.C., which is where I live now, there's significant national parks and public lands
Right.
for greenery and nature, and so I do my best to be in there as often as possible. My favorite place in DC is our arboretum, which is like a tree nursery, I guess, is the best word for it. But it's not like a nursery and like for selling. It's an open like land where the Department of Agriculture like does research
Right.
on trees and whatnot. There are the national state tree of every state is embedded in this arboretum. Like it's a
That's
large,
nice.
large, large area
Yeah.
that is focused on celebrating nature and researching ways to continue to protect it. I love being in that space. It's a great picnic spot, nothing else.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Everything comes back to food as we started and ended with. But no, I mean it's just a beautiful, beautiful moment to like recenter myself and be around nature, to walk through the bamboo forest or the
Right.
azalea garden or bonsai exhibit, whatever it is, but be around all these different elements of the natural world. In December of this year, one of the bonsai trees turns 400, and so there's a whole
Oh my gosh.
celebration I think planned. I'm not
Wow.
exactly sure what it'll be, but I'm going to it because it's such a wow, beautiful space of celebrating history and what this tree has seen, I guess, over those 400 years, but also the nature around
Right.
uh, us that we need to celebrate, cherish, and safeguard.
That's beautiful, Ben. I mean, I think about yeah, I just think about like things like that, just like celebrating nature is so important. And like I'm so glad you're going to that. I wish now I wish I should like visit or
It's 5
something.
months
Oh
from
my
now.
gosh. Yeah. Okay. I need to just figure out my visa. No, that just sounds amazing because I love nature and I think it's such a good way to like reconnect, connect to yourself and ground yourself. And you know what they say, right? Like if you like just a 20-minute walk by a body of water is enough to like reduce your anxiety by a whole lot. And I believe that because it there's nature is so powerful to heal. And I think we live in a world where being connected with everything is important, that sometimes being disconnected is probably more important now than ever. Just so that we can wrap up, I kind of want to talk a bit about how peace building is different for different people. One of the
Absolutely.
questions that I was asked when I was joining Kahanee was, what does peace look like to you? I remember saying, I have no clue. I don't know what peace is. I think it's such an abstract concept. I don't have any idea of what it is. And I think that we all like the first thing that comes to my head when we talk about peace is like the United Nations, peacekeeping troops, and big negotiations and treaties and all that stuff. But then as time went on, I think my understanding of peace and peace building has changed. I find a lot of peace in like drinking coffee in the morning and being able to enjoy that first sip and having that moment of I feel good, or going like we talked about, going for a walk in nature. That's peaceful to me. I love thrifting, for example, and I think there's a lot of peace in buying something that someone doesn't want and giving it new life. There's peace in that, and like getting rid of things that I don't want and allowing someone else to give it new life. Is there like a simple story for you, because I know that peace just lives in the everyday moments, but is there a simple story, a gesture, a look, or, kind of a conversation that reminds you of what peace really looks like in practice? Because I know that peace in practice is very different from what it is in theory. Talk a bit about that.
When I tell people I work in global peace building or supporting peace building initiative, the reaction is almost always like, "Wow, you're busy. It's really violent right now." And I mean, I laugh it off, we move on, whatever. But that's to me, peace is not stopping war. I mean, it's part of it, of course it is. But so much of the work, at least MBBI does, is ensuring the community doesn't backslide. That they're
Mm,
either out of a conflict or in an active conflict zone, but they are trying to build social cohesion, trauma informed practices, dialogue, mapping, again, whatever the
right.
conflict needs, so that they don't go back to a violent space. And to me, that is much more difficult, but also
Mm,
much more peace focused because it's again building that community. It's training a bunch of 16-year-olds how to do volunteerism work and having them do for. And you're like, there are so many different definitions of what peace and building that community up looks like. And I would say even like again, food is such a good undercurrent here. Sharing a
yeah.
meal with a stranger or a new community is building those connections. So now you know other communities, and they're not a, oh, let me just assume how this person or this faith or this race believes in things.
Right.
I don't know, how does my new friend Rameth or blah 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 or blah 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 feel about things.
Yeah.
It's adding those labels and um being much more nuanced in how you actually engage with people that leads towards peace. You're not going to have one meal and then everything is fixed. No,
No.
you're starting that process. I mean, war is profitable. Sure. Peace is not. Sure. But peace is continuing the community dynamics so that they can build and flourish together. Whether that is, again, something in the engineering or science or whatever, it doesn't have to be the traditional
Right.
political spaces. It's providing opportunities for people to collaborate and connect.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
it's like it's like a lot of that capacity building, right? Like that
absolutely,
MBBI does and like Kahanee does. Like, yeah,
yeah. Though storytelling, I mean, in and of itself is such a huge peace building, and like there are so many definitions that are outside the stop war dialogue,
mm,
bring people together. Those are all great, and I love those definitions too. But
right.
I say often on panels where I'm asked, to talk about the SDGs, especially number 16, which is related to peace building, the work MBBI does, etc. Is like, yes, we do, we work with the pretty complex conflict, post-violent situations, absolutely, but we also do on the ground small stuff and
Yeah,
conversations and outlook and family. Like those are also just as important and just as the same part of the peace building space. And in a lot of ways, I may even argue more important than stopping the violence. Not that stopping violence is not a good thing. Please let me be very clear. Stopping violence usually incurs larger of a coordination, whether that's military or governmental or confiscating weapons or a ceasefire. Those are all relatively like large scale initiatives that all need to happen. I want those to happen. Let me be clear. But the on the
you
ground,
don't want a big title tomorrow. Ben Lutz condones violence. You sure?
no, I don't. I would
Okay.
like that not to be there. That would be great. But I do condone
Okay.
conflict. That's the difference because
Right.
conflict is just how people engage with one another. It could be positive, it could be a negative, it could be in between. And I think peace building is building literally building, hence the name, relationships amongst community members to buffer against times of violent or intense conflict. Conflict is
Right.
inevitable of any kind. Like even scheduling today, we had a bit of a scheduling conflict, an easy
Right.
one, not a big deal, but conflict, right? Like conflict is inevitable to how humans engage. We all have cognizance, like that is just part of it. You can't ignore that. And so
Right.
instead, it's ensuring that you have this sense of security, like throughout the Arab world, this hospitality moment, like parts of the communities I've seen with, building those relationships amongst different communities to how to mitigate those tense
Mm,
moments. That to me is peace building. And again, it could be
well,
something as simple
yeah.
as a sports game or a meal or
Right.
friendship.
Yeah.
There are so many avenues of what that physically looks like, but the end goal is community building, social cohesion, trauma informed practices, and engaging with the
Right.
others.
Well, also, I was just thinking of like, one of my many university courses. There was too many to keep track of. But then I remember one of the theories or something that we learned, but it was about the dialectical, how there's this like push and pull and how conflict creates resolution. And then that leads to more conflict. And then this idea of like conflict bringing resolution, but also that process, giving us the ability to learn new things, to expand our ideas, expand our thinking. And again, it's not that idea that we're condoning violence and war, but it's that idea that we want to engage critically with what are our differences, and learning from that and expanding and coming with solutions. And sometimes those solutions are going to lead to more conflicts, and then it's just like cycle. But the more you engage with it, the more you learn, the more you grow and more expand. And I think I love that idea of and that kind of explanation of what peace building really is and what it really looks like, instead of blanketly being like, yeah, we just want to find a solution and full stop. But it's far from reality. That's amazing.
And finding a solution is a lot more than a one-off, one-time system.
Right.
People who think that they can solve things that quickly do not know the real dynamics of that community.
Right. That's
It's
fair.
intensive, long, patient, not profitable processes of
Right.
building connections amongst a community and rebuilding trust where it may have been lost.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, exactly. I think the work that MBBI does is so important to that, and I'm so glad that there's people out like you out there who are doing that, putting that foundation in, so that people can have conversations and be able to continue with the work. So thank you so much. I want to give you some space here to talk a little bit about you and MBBI.
So, Mediators Beyond Borders International, MBBI, has always focused on local community and Our tagline is people building peace for a more peace-able world. And the reason I got so involved with it was I was studying in my master's degree, a peace and conflict program, and MBBI sort of came onto the scene. I mean, they were already involved, but into my university specifically. And I applied to be an intern almost right away.
Right.
Fast forward 8 months, jumped up to full-time staff, and that was 6 years
Nice.
ago. It's been really wonderful to see the growth of MBBI over these
Right.
6 years, of the ways that we have been resilient and quick in reacting to conflicts. Again, like this Syria initiative most recently, but we've done this with, we had a pandemic roundtable series in 9 different languages. So people could share in their
Wow.
how they are feeling,
Right.
overcoming the isolation that the pandemic sort of wrought. So, I mean, it's been really powerful to see all these different initiatives. I mean, explore our website, mediatorsbeyondborders.org.
My gosh, that sounds amazing. I think that this is what the world needs right now. It needs people like who do the work that you do coming together. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to Kahani, but also, share your stories. And thank you
Thank you very
so
much,
much.
Honey, for your time and energy and bringing these stories to the forefront. I think that's really powerful to show other ways that people can engage with community. So I appreciate you and the community building that you do.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Yes. Bye bye.